Hey, hi, good afternoon, everyone. We hope you're all doing good, and thank you so much once again for investing your time with us. And talking about the panel discussion today, as you might be knowing, that according to the guidelines of RBI, so it says that no entity in the card transactions, such as merchants, are allowed to store the actual card numbers, and they're not actually going to store it beyond the 1st January 2022. And in addition, RBI has also listed a few key conditions to be fulfilled by the card issuers to be able to offer card tokenization services as token service providers. So in order to take this ahead, today we have an amazing panel to discuss on RBI circular on tokenization, where we will be talking about the next steps for payment service providers and participants to ensure complete and ongoing compliance. So some quick facts about SISA. We are a forensic-driven global cybersecurity company having a customer base from 40 plus countries that we have, and we have served more than 2000 plus customers across the globe. And also, one more interesting fact to note over here is that we are also one of the top 4 global payment forensic investigators. Moving on, so some of the housekeeping items for today's panel discussion. So the discussion will be for 60 minutes, and this will include the Q&A. All the attendees will be in listen-only mode, and we will also have the Q&A session after the panel discussion is over. And if you have got any queries in the meanwhile, you can put it in the chat window. Well, I am Bharat Malik and your host for the session today. I lead the global sales hunting team at SISA and having an overall experience of 9 years in the industry. Now, welcoming our moderator, Mr. Darshan, who is the founder and CEO of SISA. With more than 2 decades of experience in this industry, his mission to protect businesses from the cyber criminals. He is also a pioneer in payment security space and the first payment security assessor in the whole Asia region. And not only this, Darshan is also a core payment forensic investigator as well. So I'm pleased to welcome Darshan to take over the platform now. Darshan, over to you.
Thanks, Bharat. Thanks for the lovely introduction, and good afternoon to all of you who have joined in from all over the country. And thanks to AVS Prabhakar and Nitin Bhatnagar, who's joined in as our guests, and to my fellow colleague Kaushik Pandey, who leads our compliance and testing services. Today is one of the today's panel discussion is something that we've been getting a lot of requests across, and I'm very excited to have Prabhakar, who leads the Chief Risk and Compliance at Zeta. And Prabhakar is a veteran professional, both from the cybersecurity and payments. He brings in quite a mixed background, and of course compliance. He has led many initiatives previously in his past and currently at Zeta. He has a bunch of areas that he covers in Zeta, and as we all know, Zeta is one of the fast-growing payment services companies in the country today. So we are very glad to have Prabhakar and share his perspective from his past experience of being in the payment industry, and then from the current role that he's playing. So welcome, Prabhakar. Nice to have you on call today. Second, we've got Nitin Bhatnagar. Nitin is, of course, spearheading a lot of payment data security initiatives in the country. He represents the PCI Security Standards Council, and he's been really front-ending a lot of initiatives on public policy for the standards. And we very glad to have Nitin come here and talk from the perspective of how the standards is evolving to service many of the regulatory requirements that are coming in, and also bring in from an industry standpoint, since he engages with many of these stakeholders, get a neutral view on it. Thanks for joining in, Nitin. Then, of course, we have my colleague Kaushik. Kaushik, is a subject matter expert. He's been He's done several compliance audits across the world. He leads our compliance team. Over 150, 200 people doing assessments, and also has been part of my core team, which is to when we engage with any of the regulators for any of these standards discussions. So glad to have you, Kaushik, as well. The next, just to give you a preview for those of you, who've getting to hear about this recently, is there's a lot of traction happening on the card tokenization, the circular that got issued recently, and of course it has multiple use cases. There was lots of clarifications, nearly about 6 or 7 documents that are coming in so much from the regulator, which is very heartening. Overall, I think it's a great move from the Reserve Bank of India for one more step in terms of ensuring that the ecosystem is secure. So that's the thing, and we all know that this guideline is coming into effect from 1st of January 2022, and the ultimate responsibility of the card tokenization will be with the card networks and the issuers, and of course which will mean that the networks would have to ensure that they do frequent audits and make sure that the downstream all the providers are compliant and are meeting the required terms of the Reserve Bank of India. I would not go into the details. I'm sure most of you who have read it. In fact, the interest for this webinar is so much that we have had questions pouring in much earlier to the webinar when we got started. Today, Vishwanath, who's the Chief Risk Officer at NPCI, couldn't join us because he felt sick, and he's apologized to the audience out here that he was not able to contribute. But having said that, we've got Prabhakar and Nitin and Kaushik and myself to kind of address some of the questions that you may have and make our best attempt from there. So without further ado, I would request each of the panelists to probably start with a 60-second opening remark, what their thoughts on this move by the Reserve Bank of India is, and on tokenization and how it's going to play out in the industry. So Prabhakar, let me start with you, since you have a broad foray, earlier at FSS and now at Zeta. You got a wide exposure from the Indian banking ecosystem. So would you want to just start with that, and then we'll go to Nitin and then Kaushik. Prabhakar. Prabhakar, you're muted.
Yeah, thanks, Darshan. And good afternoon to everybody. And definitely it's a very, the circular talking about the tokenization, it will definitely increases the security and the safety of the transactions, and gives trust and confidence to the customers to do that. And it also supports recurring transactions, agility, and definitely it will be a trust, and definitely this particular circular will give lot of movement in the ecosystem and give a lot of trust on the security and privacy and the protection angle also.
Excellent. Nitin, what do you think? How do you see this playing out in the industry?
No, I think, Darshan, the tokenization, I think, as a solution being implemented by the industry, I think it's a good move to start with, and I think to secure the payment data, it's very, very important. I think one of the discussion that we were having on the chat also the days with panelists is that technology is only good as its implementation. So I think important point here that we all need to understand is that to minimize the risk and fraud, data needs to be desanitized and devalued. And I think that's what the tokenization as a technology is going to play a role. Now, I think technologies beyond tokenization, I think you talk about PCI, point-to-point encryption, EMV, and 3DS. It can also play a very critical role in helping prevent the data theft incidents from becoming the data breaches. Now, the goal of this technology is largely to eliminate the persistent value in the data you use to conduct a financial transaction. So if a criminal attacks and then steals data, there is no threat to the system and the consumer end or to the merchant. Now that's where the tokenization and other technologies are going to play a very, very crucial role in protecting the payment data. And I think tokenization as a solution is really a great start, where we can say that we can at least work in a direction where we can protect the payment data. I think that's what I have to say.
Thanks. Kaushik, how do you see this playing out, since you are doing so many assessments for different providers, issuers, merchants, acquirers, so on and so forth? So what's been the impact, and what do you hear from the industry on this particular guideline?
Sure, Darshan, thanks a lot for that. So primarily tokenization as a concept, or let's say as a technological implementation, has been in the market from quite some time, right? However, RBI now has identified that this is one of the best use cases using which they will be able to reduce the attack surface area for all the intruders. Because if there's no card number which is available, let's say on the merchant's premise, or let's say even the payment gateway, the payment aggregators and all, even if there's something or the other happens, if there's a risk, then it cannot impact the unique PII data element, which is the card number at any given point in time. If you even see from the PCI perspective as well, the tokenization guidelines was very first initiated in August 2011. That's when they came up with the tokenization guidelines, right? However, I believe that India and RBI will be one of the first local regulators who would be, let's say, pushing for tokenization across the base over here, and are uplifting, let's say, the networks and the issuers as well to implement it as a technology and as a business offering as well. So I believe that the intruders, hackers, just keep your hands off from, let's say, India's PAN number. That's it.
Right. I agree. And one of the key things that we are trying to, one trend that I see over the last decade or so is from being a follower, we've started being a leader now in the Indian ecosystem. Our Indian ecosystem, the payment ecosystem, and slowly, it's nice to have seen the metamorphosis that is happening, wherein from just being followers of various data security implementations across the world, we've now started leading the entire thing. So I think this is a very strong move by the regulator, and in such a large country such as India. This is very heartening to know that we are making the right strides. But yes, it's when I say that with all humility, that it's not easy to implement, but and it has its own set of challenges. But I think the objective and the purpose, the intent of it is what I think we all need to appreciate. And I think I reckon with what you're saying, Kaushik. So without spending too much time, let me jump into the questions that I've got. I've got a few questions. I've already started seeing questions pouring in. I'll promise you that I will take all those questions, one by one. So feel free to start typing your questions as we move forward. I'm sure each of us will make an attempt. And I see a lot of subject matter experts on this call who are our participants. And there may be questions which we may not even know, but that's fine. We will get back to you to that extent. So with all humility, we do reckon the fact that we may not have answers for all the questions, but we'll definitely make an attempt. So the question that I have for this panel is, this tokenization has been flying around for some time. RBI issued this in 2019. And now you have the COFT, which has come out from the RBI, which is card on file tokenization. And there are a whole lot of clarifications with, clarifications of this comes out with NFC, which and then you have magnetic strike, stripe transactions and stuff like that. So a lot of things happening on that space. So how is this different this time around? And what's the new thing about this? So I mean, no particular order. Anyone wants to talk? Go ahead.
Let me add to this point, Darshan. I think see the intent. I think you have to understand the security and the robustness of a tokenization system relies on many factors. And I think what RBI is trying to think on is to improve this to the next level. And the factors that may include on the security and robustness is the configuration of different components, and the overall implementation and the availability and functionality of specific security features for each product, are probably these what the organization, the end users are going to adopt. And this can include your hardware devices, may an appliance or a software application or a service offering. Now, the security objective, the key security objective of the tokenization process is to ensure the resulting token has no value to an attacker. This is what the intent for everyone has been behind of how we can make the data devalue. Now, when evaluating a tokenization solution, I'm just trying to give it for the stakeholders who are attending this call, and I think it is important also to consider the elements of the overall tokenization implementation. And I think these elements may include technologies and mechanisms used to capture the cardholder data, specifically when we talk about card-on-file transactions. Now, how a transaction moves through an entity's environment or a merchant environment, for it to be specific, the transmission of the point of capture to the authorization and endpoint, and how these tokens are retained for use, basically in the back office system and so on. I think the tokenization implementation should address the consideration that the merchants today or the entities have to take into consideration is how well they are addressing the potential attack vectors against each component, and providing the ability to confirm with the confidence that the mitigation of associated risk. So one side, the intent is how we can minimize the attack surface, and the second is how well we are implementing the solutions around tokenization when we specifically talk about the card-on-file transactions. So I think that's what is making it different. And I think Kaushik rightly pointed out, I think the intent here is that how we can minimize this risk to a point that the cardholder data is safe and secure.
Right. Yeah. Good point, Nitin. Kaushik, Prabhakar, do you have any thoughts? How is this different this time? Prabhakar, once again, I think we're not able to hear you.
Yeah. So the tokenization, as Nitin was telling, or the Kaushik, the intent is really clear. One is the security, and ensure that the value, the token value, has not got no value actually. So they wanted to reduce the value of the information, and also they are reducing the attack surface, and the data is not spread around and available at many places. It is only restricted to few entities. That is the another important thing. Also, as kind of a mandate, and there are various components within the ecosystem involved, and different people have got different roles to play, right from customer, merchant, acquirer, issuer, TSP, token requester, everybody. So these are all encompassing, and the roles and responsibilities are also there, part of this entire tokenization program. So that way it is more robust and more forward looking. So that definitely it will make the system more secure and more agile. And there are some statistics available that through tokenization, it will support businesses also, like from the increase in the volume or the agility or the transaction authorizations. So those volumes also will increase. That's what is the statistics is about.
So Kaushik, how is it different this time?
Yeah.
From
so,
2019?
Right. So basically, Darshan, I'll give a more technical feeling as well. Let's say technical piece as well over here. I believe it's a strategic step by RBI. At the end of the day, it's not that something which has happened overnight, because if you'll see the sequence of events, right, starting from, I believe, Jan 2019, that's when the tokenization, let's say, came up, correct? And at that time, it was specific to a few applications, few mobile applications, and so forth. Now, in let's say in August 2021, they again came up with an updation stating that, okay, now it's extended to wearable technologies as well. And just before 6 to 8 months back, they also issued PA and the PG guidelines in the same manner. So they knew that to make sure that the PA and the PG, the service providers, the merchants and all, okay, how exactly the payment ecosystem needs to be transformed for the entire e-commerce, or let's say for the entire, let's say, payment ecosystem chain, right? Okay, that's where, let's say, they brought the last piece, which was the tokenization for the complete industry. And that is the very reason why they are calling off that in the entire payment ecosystem chain, okay, nobody is allowed to store the card data. It's only the issuers and, let's say, the tokenization service providers, or we should say the networks, who are allowed to store based upon their authorization as well. So that is what, let's say, they have clearly mentioned over there. So what has changed? They have extended it to the wearable technologies, to, let's say, different applications as well, because initially they started with magnetic secure transmission, NFC based application, mobile application, and so forth. Now they have extended it, and they have come out with options as well, so that, let's say, at the end of the day, the consumers, like, let's say, you and me, at the end of the day, we can transact more securely around the ecosystem. And I believe that RBI, by coming with the tokenization guideline, are also pushing across that it's not, let's say, an easy task to manage, like, let's say, I'll say one of the most number of transactions the entire world maybe at any given point in time. Last month itself, 3 trillion transactions were being managed by NPCI themselves, if I'm not mistaken, based upon the data. So they know what exactly is going on, and they have made a good step on the same. Darshan?
Just maybe this the last two questions have actually set the right stage, I think, for the poll. So Ashwini, do you want to quickly run a poll so that we get a sense of from the audience what they think about it? Ashwini. So as per the poll, as per the new circular, who will have the capacity to de-tokenize card data? So I'm sure most of you have read the circular, but if you have not, I think it's a good time to get that clarified. So the question here is, as per the new circular, who will have the capacity to de-tokenize the card data? So the idea is to, once it gets tokenized and then anonymized, tokenized, and you have a token, then who has the ability to de-tokenize the card data? So go ahead. So the first option is de-tokenization lies with the banks only, banks and token service providers only with the token service providers, and merchants and payment aggregators as per their wish. That's an easy one. Just give another 10 seconds so that at least 50-60% of the people vote, complete their votes. Go ahead, all the people that are there on this call, go ahead, complete your voting, and then we will publish the results. Okay, I think we've got the results out. So the answers is 17% de-tokenization lies with the banks only, 46% banks and token service providers, 32% only with the token service providers, and 4% says merchants and payment aggregators. Okay. Any quick comments by our panelists? So
I believe we are going in the right direction, Darshan. Even the audience is, I believe, intelligent enough. And after this particular, let's say, panel discussion, nobody will be storing card data. All of them will be storing only the tokens at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. So banks and the token service providers are typically the ones who are allowed, and basically the issuers and the card networks, and the card networks are typically the token service providers. So yeah, so that's the way the circular goes for those of you. And then merchants, largely the e-commerce merchants, will not be allowed to store the card data post January 1st, 2022. So that's the circular for get everyone on this onto speed on this call today. Excellent. With that, I think it's good to go to the next question that we've got for the. Okay, I've got questions already pouring in, lots of them, but let's keep moving forward. I'll finish off a couple of more questions, and then I'll open up. I'll start taking questions from the audience. So the next question I have for this distinguished panel here is, replacing the card number with tokens across the entire payment ecosystem, and keeping it secure with networks and issuers, right? So card networks and the issuers are typically banks. How do you think it's going to play out in the Indian e-commerce industry? Because currently the Indian e-commerce are so used to, especially the today when I go to any of the e-commerce, either Flipkart or Amazon, with so much our card data is stored. How is it going to impact the customer checkout process? How do you think? There's no specific flow, but whoever has an answer here in the panel, please go ahead.
So I'll take a jab at it, and then let's say the others can also add. I believe from a customer perspective, like let's say you and me might not even feel the change in the flow altogether, right? Because at the end of the day, the merchants, or let's say any other, let's say member in the entire payment ecosystem, are allowed to store the last 4 digits of the card number along with the issuer name as well. Okay, that's what the COF guidelines is all about, correct? And at the end of the day, they will be taking, let's say, this particular service from any of the networks, or let's say from any of the network service provider, whosoever will be giving them the tokens. And then accordingly, the transaction will go in the very same manner, the same way like let's say it used to. However, of course, the risk will be less when we are doing a particular transaction. Even I believe merchants should start marketing this particular thing as well, stating that, okay, now we do not store your card number at all. Now your PII data is not at all, let's say, at n number of different places, right? So why not, like the way, let's say we used to say, right? Why not use the challenge as an opportunity? Why not use this particular thing as an opportunity and say that, okay, now we do not have your card data, do not worry, okay? And whosoever has the card data, they're also certified, because if you read the tokenization guidelines and let's say the different things as well, they have to get audited based upon the certain imperial auditor guidelines, and not just, let's say, the networks. It's also the acquirers, the tokenization service providers, the issuers, whosoever is involved in the entire payment ecosystem also needs to get audited. And the last thing which I'll just add, and then accordingly I'll just transfer the baton to others as well, is that if you will see the mechanism using which RBI has mentioned to generate the token, it's the combination of the card and let's say whatever other details the bank or let's say that particular merchant, the TSP, the token service provider, wants to have, okay, along with the merchant as well. Means for each and every merchant you will be having a different token altogether, okay, which let's say again reduces the risk surface area to even lesser. Because if let's say even I get compromised on one or the other merchants, okay, it cannot be used worldwide, globally, at every single channel. And then accordingly, it's very easy to monitor those kinds of suspicious traffic and accordingly take action. On that particular note, I'll just pass on the baton to Nitin and Prabhakar.
So basically, you can also route it back to the merchant, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Prabhakar, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So experience per se, I don't see much difference, but RBI guidelines also very clearly says that there is a definite opt-in is required. So consent is also required. That's what RBI circular is also telling from the customer perspective. So that is one. And again, the e-commerce per se, they will quickly adapt to it from the backend. And the tokenization, what kind of tokenization they will adapt? If you see the PCI guidelines, you can do tokenization full, or you can do alphanumeric, numericals, or you can do first 6, last 4, and in between also you can do the tokenization. So the kind of tokenization methodology you are adopting, that's the implementation part of life. So the experience per se may not be much different for the customer, but he will get more confidence. And also the issuers are all part of the COFT, they're also qualifying the merchants with whom this tokenization arrangement is already done. So the customers also will get, and another important thing is that customers can have a number of cards tokenized. So they can also use the flexibility wise also, still they continue to get the same flexibility and the opportunity what they were having before. And those cards are also whatever the cards available for the checkout, that still continues, but only the thing is that it will have more the critical data tokenized and replaced or surrogated with a value which is a combination of 4 or 5 parameters. And I could see the kind of parameters they have given, a kind of a zero trust is also concepts also built into it. So it's more safer and more secure. So it will make user experience more richer and more safer.
Right. Good insight. And the tokenization service requester concept is also come in, wherein you can request. So merchants could essentially make that request happen, and then and there is a compliance component there as well to make sure that the tokenization request service requester is also meeting certain standards. So that piece is also very well covered. So moving forward, Nitin, can I move forward? Do you have any comments, or should I? Is it okay?
No, I think Darshan, you can move forward. I think it's covered everything there.
All right, perfect. In the interest of time, because we've got some brilliant questions waiting for us, so I just want to make sure that we answer as many as we can. So the next question is, what are the different steps for say for example, one way to be a merchant? What are the different steps an organization would need to take to implement this circular for that matter? So for example, I am e-commerce merchant. What do you think is the step 1, step 2, and step 3? If someone can throw light, we can do that, and then we can, yeah. Any volunteers, the panel? Prabhakar, do you want to give it a shot?
Yeah. So what I suggest is that you can go through the PCI guidelines. The guidelines are there. Both from the token service provider perspective, consumer perspective. I think a couple of guidelines are available. There are 2 guidelines I have seen, and both are available. One is from the product perspective, another from implementation in the guidelines perspective. So that's the best way you can start implementing those things. And also a lot of certification is also around this to begin the program. And on top of it, this ecosystem has to go through the mandatory requirements by the RBI, like certain empaneled auditor, auditing, and all those things are there. And the mandatory audits are also prescribed from sustenance and continuous perspective, year on year and all. So, and also they have to understand exactly what is the data flow and what kind of data they are storing, and based on that they can take the decision, and a migration approach can be planned. For me, these guidelines are more helpful, and also the circular PCI guidelines as well as the RBI circular in conjunction.
Sure. Nitin, do you have any inputs? What do you think should be the logical step?
I just, I'm really sorry. I just wanted to cover, I think, what just Prabhakar said. I think we also have some great 6 to 7 FAQs around the tokenization. I think, interestingly, talking about one of the FAQs, I think that I can see on my screen is, I think which type of tokens are addressed by the PCI SSC tokenization document. So I think the first one, largely, it covers about EMVCo as a token service provider for the payment tokens for the entities designated by the EMVCo. And then we have, as Prabhakar just highlighted, tokenization product security guidelines, which we released in 2015. We just wanted for everyone. We are also internally trying to see if we can get this document updated in near future, so that I think it's going to help the industry for the implementation. And the third one is, I think we also have a PCI tokenization guidelines 2011. So I think those are really relevant. And I think important FAQ that we have is, what is the difference between the acquiring tokens, issuer tokens, and the payment tokens? I think having an understanding on how the tokens are going to work in the ecosystem is going to play a very, very important role for industry to implement it in a very right fashion.
Fantastic, Nitin. So what we could do is, for all the participants who attended this panel or who have registered, we can share across this as part of our, when we done with the webinar, we'll send out all the link of the FAQs. So that will help community as well. Kaushik, what are your thoughts? What could be the implementation steps? Any thoughts which can make the life of our participants a lot more easier?
Sure, Darshan. So I believe right now the objective is more towards the merchant, that okay, if I'm a merchant and I want to go ahead with this, first thing is please onboard a tokenized service provider with whom, let's say, you can get tokens, because after January you will not be allowed to store card numbers at all. So first of all, get that particular business piece up up and running. All right. The second most tedious task which will come is that what will happen to the old data? What exactly you'll do? At that time, you will have to identify the dependencies of that particular old data across your organization, across your business functions, and slowly reduce those dependencies. Because today I know with whomsoever, let's say, we have been interacting as well in settlement, in clearing, in fraud dispute, and n number of different cases, organizations application has been built in such a manner that they will take the card number itself, right? So that particular technology piece has to change, and it will take time. It cannot just happen overnight, right? So then you need to take care of those as well let's say at any given point in time. So first of all, business should be up and running, and then whatever old data you had, let's make sure that okay, the old things are also up and running. Those are the two aspects. And the third aspect over here for majority of the merchants will be that from January onwards, I think, or let's say as per our understanding of the RBI circular, you will not be allowed to use the old card numbers which were there across the base, right? You will have to again request all the customers to give their authorization that yes, I can perform these kinds of transactions for you, where the token has to get generated, and let's say all those things need to happen in a sequential manner, right? So, and that has to start not from January, but actually from November. Let's say it should have been started by now itself, let's say from October itself, where you have to start this particular transition at, let's say, a sequence manner. And that is the way reason why exactly many of you might be aware that Visa recently launched the first, let's say, the card network, the TSP service across India as well. Okay, so the service providers are there to help you across. I mean, that should be the first step, and the second step, go back and see what all data, where all the data is lying, and start deleting it. Darshan?
Yeah, thanks, Kaushik. And I'm sure that there are a number of other networks who have plans to roll out similar service, and the issuers as well. So there are enough products and solutions out there in the market to support. And for those of you who are from the service provider community, this may be also one other opportunity to, many banks want to onboard this products, these kinds of solutions as well. So if you have a tokenization service, then this might be one thing that you can, you can offer to the banks. And I see lots of payment companies trying to start with this business model as well. So lots of opportunities, so to speak. Yes, we need to move, we need to adapt, but a whole lot of opportunities coming our way. So that's a very, very good point. So I'll start taking questions from the audience because we've just got about less than 25 minutes on today's panel. So just want to make sure that we do that. I've got a whole lot of questions here, and I had a list of other questions as well. But anyway, let's start. So the first question is so this is by Hema. I'll be calling out the first name and not the full name, the first name, so that we recognize the question that has come in. So the question is, what is PCI or RBI take on software-based security modules? So PCI or RBI's take on software-based security modules. Is this reference to the software security framework, or does it? Hema, would you be able to clarify, give us a little more details about software-based security modules? Are you talking about HSM equivalent for, for key management? Is that your question? So Hema, if you want to clarify that question, it will help us. So Kaushik, assuming this question is on software-based security modules, wherein currently for key key management HSMs are being used. And I think this context is in the case where things are on the cloud, and you have cloud-based HSMs and and software-based HSMs or security modules. How, do you have any view on that impact from on any of the standards that we are speaking today?
Right, Darshan. So primarily, let's say DSS doesn't get impacted due to, let's say, the software-based systems which are hosted on the cloud. I believe many of the cloud service providers have been giving HSM services from quite some time, the key management services and so forth. However, if you go to PCI PIN standard, if you go to PCI 3DS and let's say the others as well, there comes a P2P as well, of course. There comes a requirement where they said, okay, I need to have a PCI PTS approved PO, that particular the HSM device, and that's what creates a challenge, because majority of these software-based HSMs are not PCI PTS approved, or let's say not FIPS approved as well, right? So I'll say that based upon RBI, what they have been mentioning is not as per the PAPG guideline, not at all. But if we'll just reference one more circular over here, the DPS circular. In that, they have mentioned clearly that it has to follow PCI HSM guidelines. They have mentioned that, okay, it should follow the PCI PIN guidelines, the P2P guidelines, and the DSS guidelines. So at that time, yes, it will get impacted. And the PTS approval of, let's say, the particular HSM will be required at any given point in time. Darshan?
Correct. Yeah. So, Nitin, you want to add anything, or
I think Kaushik just covered, I think, everything. I think it's all about following the best practices, and I think talking about the software. I think PCI Security Standard Council has been already working on the software security framework, and I think it's going to evolve. As a standard, it's going to evolve. We will see a lot of new use cases which are going to come by for the implementation, and also recently when it comes to the cloud, I think anyway, we all know that there is an SIG which is on the final leg of completion on the cloud orchestration. And I think there was a blog post in the bulletin which was released on properly scoping the cloud environment. So I think for the audience perspective, if they have not read it through, I think it would be good for them to go on to the PCI Security Standards Council website to get a perspective.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for that. Next question is by Raghav. So Raghav says, after obtaining the additional factor of authentication, by standing instruction from customer on recent, auto recurring transaction, does the merchant again need to get an additional factor for tokenization, as payment gateways cannot store card data? So is this required, for once again, for the recurring transactions? Is that to store card data? To store, I guess, for the tokenization, if I understood this question right. Yeah. Anyway, did I articulate the question right? This Kaushik, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure, Darshan.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, go ahead, Prabhat.
No, I don't know, but if my understanding is right, for the authorization, definitely the additional factor authentication is required. Additional factor is required authentication purpose, and from a transaction perspective, it's like a normal flow. You should have another factor of authorization, like a OTP. Whatever the current flow you are following, you have to stick to the same flow. That's what is written in the circular.
Right, and I saw something somewhere else that you could do for the very first time on both the additional factor of authentication for for processing that particular transactions, and as well as subscribing to the tokenization thing. So Kaushik, you had the same point, I guess. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay, so this is a good time to take the second polling question. So we can roll out the second poll question for the audience. Ashwini, you want to bring that up? So the question, to read from the slide here, is RBI asked authorized card payment networks to frequently audit their environment. How frequent should the audit be conducted or must be conducted? So select one of the following: at least yearly, must be twice a year, quarterly, or as per the request of RBI. So what do you think? So I'll just give a couple of seconds for all the participants to kind of reply. We've got about under 40% voted, so I'm just quickly waiting for everyone to at least give it a jab. Okay. Ashwini, we can close it and then publish the results. Okay, so the answers is at least yearly, say 47%, twice a year is 20%, quarterly is 26%, and as per the request of the RBI, 7%. So panel, what do you think? Can close this. Let me close the poll. Yeah, perfect. So what do you think about the answer here? You know,
Absolutely right.
accessibility is what is the requirement of the standard, I mean, of the circular, but are we thinking the right direction?
Prabhakar was saying something. Prabhakar, please go ahead.
It's yearly once, no? Annually they have to.
Correct. It's yearly once, but what do you think about? Would that be sufficient? Do you think, or to ensure compliance, or do you think it's
annually once? I think a mandatory kind of a thing. But any high impact change happens to the environment, automatically you will do it
sure.
as an affected party.
All right. Excellent. Okay. Let me move on to the next question. Okay, so I'll try to take Jitender's question. Jitender is the next question. Can only last 4 digits be of guest card be stored? No CVV or expiration date. So is that allowed? The last 4 digits, is that allowed to be stored with no CVV or expiration date? That's the question. Anyone wants to take from the panel?
Right, Darshan. So as per the RBI circular, it's the last 4 digits along with the card issuer name as well, which can be stored.
Yeah. So the answer for Jitender is yes. You are right. The last 4 digits can be stored. Of course, no expiration date or no expiration. Yeah. Prabhakar, you wanted to add something?
No. I think it is last 4 digits and card issuer name.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks for that addition, Prabhakar. Okay. So the next question is from Paulami. So what different infrastructure bank have to bring will affect the bank? I guess the question, if I were to paraphrase this question, is that what will be the impact on the banking infrastructure with this card tokenization coming in? How will it impact the banking infrastructure? How will it impact? My related question is how does it impact PCI? Because PCI compliance, many banks are still on the issuing side have not complied with the PCI standards as well. So now with the card tokenization also coming in that scope, how will this play out? Anyone?
Yeah,
Nitin,
I think Darshan, let me pitch in here. So how I think we should rephrase this to the FAQ that we have. I think it's how the PCI DSS is going to apply to the payment tokens, right? So I think payment tokens, probably we all know that it's been defined by the EMV co, and they have a specification, EMV payment tokenization specification, and they have a technical framework. Now, talking about how the payment tokens are used. They are basically used in conjunction with the dynamic token cryptogram and all the other sufficient domain controls that are enforced during an entire payment transaction. Now, having said that, let me specifically talk about the applicability of the PCI DSS to the payment tokens for separately for the service providers and then for the merchants and acquirers. Now, for the entities, who are the token service providers, within the TSPs, token data environment, the PCI DSS and the additional security requirements for TSPs apply for the protection of payment tokens and the payment card data. Now, and that's what is covered as part of our payment tokenization guidelines also. Now, for the other entities, which includes your merchants and acquirers, let's talk about, because nobody is talking about acquirers. We are all just trying to focus on some issuing entities, right, at this point of time, right? So a payment token, which is defined and used in accordance to the EMV payment tokenization specification. Now, PCI DSS would still applies anywhere where the account data is stored, processed, or transmitted. Now, if any system that is storing or processing or transmitting payment tokens also stores and processes or transmits account data, which covers your PAN, right? Or is connected to systems that stores or process or transmits the account data. Now, those systems are still going to be in the scope of PCI DSS requirements. So, there has to be a little, and I think industry has to understand the applicability point of view, what gets covered and what doesn't get covered, right? So I think this is what I think from the coverage point of view on the applicability of the PCI standards is considered. And I think for more information, I think the industry has to go through these documents very much in detail to understand how, and I'm just repeating, I'm trying to focus only on one messaging here, Darshan, is how well you implement is going to decide the future. So we talking about implementing tokenization and saying we are going to reduce the risk is not going to work. How well you implement the solutions is going to help you from preventing the frauds or the cyber attacks or the data breaches.
Yeah, and so the related question there is, which I had posed is, because this being a compliance question, maybe Kaushik can answer, is many of the banks, Kaushik, you've seen that, at least in India, on the issuing side, there's hardly any banks which have been, compliant on the payment data security. Now, relating to what Nitin just mentioned, these banks would need to follow at least the PCI DSS standard, so to speak. So how is this going to play out, especially in the the digital payment security circular guideline that has come in, where banks are required to be compliant to PCI DSS, and now you've added one more scope that is coming in, and issuing was never part of this discussions earlier. So how does this play out from a compliance standpoint? Your thoughts, and then we go to the next question.
Sure, Darshan. So primarily, again, I'll refer back to the same thing, right? DPS's circular always, let's say, came back and said, issuer, acquirer, whosoever you are, you have to be PCI compliant, whichever scope you have, right? This tokenization just added one more module inside the same CMS, inside the same card management system, which was there. Many of the, let's say, the banks, let's say the issuer's application, the CMS application supports this particular thing as a service. Like the question which was asked, I believe, was specifically that, okay, what will changes have to be done at, let's say, at the bank's end once we are going ahead with this particular model? I believe the card management system which you might be having, or many of the times the switch as well, which you might be having, might support these functionalities, or you might have to upgrade your version to get this particular module up and running at your system if you want to be a TSP, right? However, for acquirers, you will be token requester, or you will be a part of the token requester. At that time, tokenization guidelines are very specific, and they said that, okay, whosoever is token requester, they might be required to store the token and the associated keys as well to secure those tokens at any given point in time. So let's say your applications, your databases and all should be able to manage, maintain and secure these tokens along with the associated keys, and then accordingly, let's say, things will be fine for you. Darshan.
A very important point. The tokens also have to be secure, and as per the annexure, they have to mention how they're, how an entity is going to has secured their tokenization or the tokens, so to speak. So it's not that you could play around with the tokens and not give it enough importance. So moving to the next question, this is Akansh. So question is, do we expect PCI DSS requirements change in line with card on file tokenization adoption, given that the merchants, acquirers, PA, PGs will not store the actual card data? So maybe Nitin, you're the most appropriate to answer this. Will the PCI DSS requirements change because of this? Do you think?
Not really. I think, see, the standards, I was, before this call, I think I was speaking to Mr. Prabhakar also. I think for the audience perspective, stakeholders, I think these standards are developed globally, and I think and these standards are taken into consideration while we are developing these standards. The feedback comes from the entire global payment industry, and I think standards would have its own role to play when the implementation happens for the to protect the payment card data or the payment data specifically. Now, having said that, definitely the supporting guidance documents, which I've been talking about, implementation documents, are being released in parallel from the PCI Security Standard Council to support these kind of changes that comes by when it comes to protecting the payment data. The requirement-wise, everything remains same, and I think we all need to also understand that the DSS 3.2.1 we are just looking forward to PCI DSS version 4.0, which is going to be one of the major change of the standard altogether. And I think as an industry, we will see a lot of things which will get covered. What we are seeing as just as the changes that we see from the industry, and these changes are global, not just India. So the standards will have its own say, and I think the requirements are going to play a very, very crucial role. So be assured, I think the standards are going to be supportive in this, and I think if there is support, any supporting guidance or implementation support which is required for the industry, which is going to come by as we talk.
Excellent, Nitin. So we will also circulate any of those FAQs, and for people who want to get more information, just stay hooked on to our LinkedIn page, or keep in line with our our mailing list, so that we'll keep you posted on any of such things that comes out. The next question is by Anil. The question is, will the tokenization be feasible while doing the physical card swipe transactions? If yes, what kind of changes would be required at the POS end? So the question is, will the tokenization be feasible while doing at the physical card transactions, swipe transactions? So Kaushik, you and I discussed this earlier today. So you want to quickly give this answer, and then we can move on.
Yeah, sure, Darshan. So basically, the tokenization guidelines are specific to NFC-based transactions, magnetic secure transmission, MST-based. So MST, basically the Samsung Pay-based, let's say, mechanism which is being used as well. And they haven't specifically targeted or focused towards swipe or dip transactions at any given point in time. And majority of the times, tokenization is not required whenever, let's say, you are doing these kinds of, let's say, transactions, because EMV chip itself is meant for security. So it's securing, let's say, all the data at that regular point in time. So I think that, okay, let's say we believe that we are not focusing on that particular portion as of now. We are more focused on the MST, the NFC-based transactions, where token can be embedded as a part of the transaction. The token can be used to, let's say, perform the transaction as well at any given point in time. Darshan.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kaushik. I think fantastic set of questions. It's just pouring in, and we're not able to take it. But in the interest of time, Ashwini, you got one more final poll question to open up, and then I'll probably open it up for the final set of questions. Ashwini, Bharat, do you want to read this question out? Bharat? Yeah. Okay. So question here is, SISA being a certain empaneled auditor can help you complying RBI tokenization circular. Do you want us? I think do you think SISA can help you in any of these? So feel free to put this question. Yes, no, or you've engaged with someone else. So those are the couple of few options out. Okay. So the next question, which I have, which I think in the interest of time, we can take one last question from the audience. So I will take this question of Sahil. I think Sahil's question is more in terms of, is it applicable only to online business? So I think we've covered that. So Sahil, at this point in time, yes, online, and then to a certain extent the NFC, which which Kaushik spoke about, the near field communication and contactless payment. So that's our understanding at this point in time. One more question, and we will. This question is by Ganesh. Okay, this question is from Ganesh, which says that, will the card issuer or banks can start charging the end users because of tokenization? So maybe Prabhakar, you can take this question, and then do you think banks will start charging money for this?
No, from the circular it is very clear that there are no additional charges to the customers.
Yeah. So Ganesh, not to worry. This I think RBI has repeatedly mentioned, even in the first circular in 2019 and this circular which has come out, that no banks are allowed to charge any additional cost to the end customers. So fantastic. I think we've got a lot of questions. Apologies to those who have not been, if we are being able to handle, answer all the questions. If you are in touch with any of our CSITs, so feel free to reach them out. We will take these questions and make sure that we answer it for you. And we'll also keep sharing the updates. So We just got 2 minutes on the clock. Quickly, Bharat, you want to take it and summarize, and then probably close the session. Over to you, Bharat.
Yeah, thanks, Darshan. So first of all, would like to thanks all the panelists, and thanks to you, Darshan, for moderating this session today. And big thanks to Nitin for taking out some time to deliver the knowledge for the participants. Thank you so much, Prabhakar. Thank you, Kaushik. And even thanks to all the participants for taking out your time to join us for this amazing panel discussion. And we know that with all these sessions that we have been doing, due to the time constraint, that we've not been able to take up all the questions, but you can feel free to reach us at any point of time with any of the sites or the email IDs which are given at the end of the slide, so that we'll be able to address and help you in whatever the case might be. So with that note, I would, and then I forgot to mention the recording of this particular session will be soon there on the YouTube channel of SISA. So you, anytime you want to refresh this particular thing, you will be having that particular access as well. So with that particular note, I wish all of you have a good evening ahead, and thank you once again for joining with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.